in 1820. This guy was the ruler of the British Empire. Decided his wife was such an inconvenience that he tried to have her executed for high treason. Thanks to the full force of the British government for making it look justified, and they almost got away with it. But instead, it backfired so spectacularly, it changed the monarchy forever because of it. To understand the sheer insanity of this, you have to understand the man. It was 1795. George is the Prince of Wales, heir to the throne, and he is a complete fucking disaster. He was drowning in debt, a cool £600,000, which today money is about 75 million British pounds. Also, he's already secretly married to a Catholic woman, which is a huge no-no, and his dad, King George III, is fed up. The deal is simple. Marry a proper Protestant princess, produce an heir, and Parliament will pay off your astronomical bar tab. So he agrees to marry his cousin, Caroline of Brunswick. The moment he meets her, he takes one look, turns to his valet, and asks for a glass of brandy. That's the romantic start to this fairy tale. He thought she was vulgar and unhygienic. She thought he was a fat, arrogant mess. They managed to do their duty exactly once, producing a daughter, Princess Charlotte. Immediately after the birth, George sent Caroline a note that basically said, "We are never speaking or seeing each other again. Good luck." He got his heir, he got his money, and he banished her to a house in Blackheath, hoping she'd just disappear. But Caroline didn't disappear. She set up her own little court, became a social figure, and worse, the public started to like her. Meanwhile, George's life was a never-ending parade of mistresses, gluttony, and spending insane amounts of money. The problem was his one legitimate heir was a daughter. And in the 19th century, that wasn't just disappointing. That was a full-blown constitutional crisis. A king needs a son. And George couldn't get a son from Caroline because he refused to be in the same room with her. His hatred for her festered for over a decade. Every time he saw her name in the papers, every time he heard the public cheer for her, it was a reminder of his failure and his humiliation. He needed her erased, completely and permanently. A divorce wouldn't be enough. It would make her a martyr. He needed her gone in a way that would forever stain her name. So George, now Prince Regent because his dad had gone mad, decided to go for the nuclear option. In 1806, he launched what they called the Delicate Investigation. The name itself was a joke. It was a secret government inquest designed to find evidence that Caroline had committed high treason. And what was the treason? Adultery. Because according to the law at the time, if the wife of the heir to the throne was unfaithful, it was considered treason against the crown, a crime punishable by death. This wasn't about morality. This was a legal loophole for murder. George's team, led by his fixers, spread rumors that Caroline had taken lovers and even had an illegitimate child. They leaned on her neighbors, pressured her staff, and did everything they could to fabricate a case. The government's own commissioners eventually had to admit they found no foundation for the claims. But that didn't matter to George. The goal was never to find the truth. The goal was to create enough smoke to justify the fire. He used the mere existence of the investigation to further isolate Caroline, restrict her access to her daughter, and paint her as a morally corrupt woman in the press. He was laying the groundwork, preparing the public for what was to come, a show trial where the verdict was already decided before the first gavel ever dropped. When George IV finally became king in 1820, he went all in. He wasn't messing around with simple adultery allegations anymore. His legal team presented what they called the green bag of evidence to Parliament, a folder filled with sworn statements from Italian servants he'd bribed and coerced. The charges were absolutely insane. The main accusation was that Caroline had a long-term affair with her Italian servant, Bartolomeo Pergami. But they didn't stop there. They're also out here saying she was dancing topless at some Geneva ball, which, let's be honest, sounds like the only reason anyone would go to a ball in Geneva. They said she and Pergami shared a tent on their travels in a way that was indecent and improper. But the real fucked up charge, the one specifically engineered to make every person in that room want to claw their own skin off, was incest. Because apparently topless dancing and sharing a tent wasn't doing enough damage. They needed to go full scorched earth. Let's make sure this woman can never show her face in society again. That's the kind of charge where even thinking about it makes you want to dip your brain in bleach. They weren't trying to embarrass her. They were trying to erase her. This was a move to make her seem not just unfaithful, but monstrous, and all of it was packaged as high treason. The punishment for a queen convicted of treason was death. The trial itself was a spectacle of hypocrisy that would be funny if it wasn't so terrifying. It happened in the House of Lords, and it was a complete circus. The press covered every salacious detail, and the public was completely riveted. Crowds gathered every day, but they weren't there to see the Queen condemned. They were there to cheer for her. They saw right through it. They saw a king who was famously sleeping with his own mistress, Lady Conyngham, while this was going on, trying to execute his wife for doing the same thing. The evidence was laughably weak. It was all hearsay from paid servants whose stories kept changing. One of the star witnesses, Theodore Majaki, was asked about specific details, and his only answer became a famous punchline. Non mi ricordo. I do not remember. The whole case was built on non mi ricordo. Meanwhile, Caroline's popularity soared. People wore medallions with her face on them. They burned effigies of the king and his ministers. The government realized they had a huge problem. This wasn't just about a guilty or not guilty verdict anymore. It was about preventing a full-blown revolution. The Lords eventually passed the bill to annul the marriage, but by such a narrow margin that the government knew it would never pass the House of Commons. They were forced to withdraw the bill. The verdict was technically not guilty, but it wasn't a victory. It was a humiliating retreat. They couldn't get the death sentence, so they just dropped the whole thing. George had failed. So what was the legacy of this whole fucking mess? First, it completely broke the relationship between the monarchy and the people. George IV died one of the most hated kings in British history, and a big reason was this public humiliation. He showed the entire country that the crown was willing to use the full power of the state to destroy a woman out of pure spite. Second, it supercharged the media. The press realized they could make a fortune covering royal scandals, and that public opinion actually had power. This was the birth of the modern celebrity news cycle, and the royals have been dealing with it ever since. But the most important legacy was the lesson the monarchy itself learned. Never get caught trying to kill your wife. The institution realized that these kinds of personal, vengeful attacks on a popular figure could actually threaten the stability of the crown itself. Future royals became obsessed with managing their public image, with presenting a facade of quiet, dull, moral stability. The wild, vengeful, public cruelty of George IV was a line they never crossed again. They learned to handle their scandals quietly, with private payoffs and carefully worded press statements, because they saw what happened when you tried the alternative. The delicate investigation was never about Caroline's guilt. It was about George's power. King George IV, a man who proved that when you have unlimited power, a bad marriage, and zero fucking self-awareness, you don't get therapy. You get creative with treason charges. The lesson here isn't about love, marriage, or even justice. It's that when you're powerful enough to turn your personal bullshit into a constitutional crisis, maybe, just maybe, you should ask yourself if you're the problem. Spoiler alert, George never did. Drop your thoughts in the comments about which historical figure you want me to roast next. And remember, no matter how bad your relationship is, at least you're not trying to have your spouse executed for treason using government resources.